This is Dr. Jerome Corsi, and today is Wednesday. It's August 2nd, 2023. I want to do a special broadcast today focusing on climate change. And the theme of this broadcast is going to be that I see a major shift where climate scientists are coming out and saying that this global warming is nonsense. And this is a major development, because up until now, the global warmers have captured the attention of the press. They dominate the press. I'll read you a couple of emails here, and I do a Google search every day in terms of how the just climate issues, just kind of keep in touch with but every day when I get them, I'm going to try to find a couple here. It's amazing to me, the articles you get constantly. It's just bombarded, and there's a theme that seems to be the theme that is broadcast to everybody. Okay, let's get on this. And so then the Washington Post, New York Times, all the major news agencies just jump on the theme. So for climate, okay, so climate right now is, here's just the articles, the Google alerts. Climate change role in July heat waves overwhelming, scientists say. That's Reuters. Okay, climate change is pushing people in Honduras to leave farming and migrate. That's NPR, National Public Radio. The Guardian. Deadly global heat waves, undeniably the result of climate change, scientists show. Undeniably. Can't deny it. And then let's continue. I mean, it just goes on and on. The Guardian has been really on this theme. No one wants to be right about this. Climate scientists, horror and exaggeration as global heat waves take over the world. I mean, it's as global predictions play out. It's astounding to me how this theme has dominated so much of the media, and how completely wrong it is. Global warming. Another alert I get here. Again, it's the same thing. Heat waves in U.S., Europe, quote, virtually impossible, end quote, without climate change, study finds. That's the Washington Post. Politico. The summer is what climate change looks like, scientists say. Politico. New York Times. July heat waves affected by climate change, attribution study finds. It just goes on and on. NPR. U.S., European heat waves virtually impossible without climate change. I think I read that one. So that's what you get from the press. And it's what you'll get if you inquire with your local university. You'll get the same thing. It's all about climate change and global warming. They have no comprehension that it could be different. It's a insisted upon theme. And if you're an academic, you will not get promoted unless you're on this theme. Now, my book, I want to start with that. My book on climate change, which is The Truth About Energy, Global Warming, and Climate Change, has done extremely well. And it has in it a lot of science, but I make it understandable, I believe. And you don't have to be trained in science or math to read it. I try to explain in common sense terms what it means. But it explains that the climate is a very intricate system mathematically. It's a nonlinear system, which means it doesn't always turn out the same way. Predictions don't work. Climate models don't work, and I'm going into that in more detail. But I'm very pleased with how this book is done, and it also has themes in it which you probably haven't heard much about. Certainly, I've been on the theme of abiotic oil, that oil is not fossil fuel for ages. This book has a lot on that, including a whole section on the Fischer-Tropsch equations, which were developed by the Germans in World War II. They made synthetic oil, and expanding Earth. The Earth has expanded. Now, I'm encouraging you to read, and there's a lot of books here I want to make sure you are aware of and cover. This one is Apocalypse Never by Michael Schellenberger. Now, he's quite good. He is he won, he was, first of all, came from the Green Movement. I mean, he was an environmentalist, And he was invited to work with the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, but he is not a true believer. He's the founder and president of Environmental Progress, an independent, nonpartisan research organization in Berkeley, California. I mean, he definitely comes from the left, but his major themes are that if we move to completely green energy, we move entirely to wind and solar, literally billions of people are going to die because of the fact that that's where the billions of people are going to die, not because of global warming. He said the realities are that we need to be able to have enough energy in order to feed and to nourish and to care for the 8 billion people or so that we have on the planet. And he is reasonable about this. He's accepting of economic growth. I'll just read a paragraph or two. The moral of the story is that economic growth and the rising demand for food, lighting, and energy drive product and energy transitions, but politics can constrain them. Energy transitions depend on people wanting them when it comes to protecting the environment by moving to superior alternatives public attitudes and public action require. In other words, he is not for just insisting that we transition. And for instance, he writes, happily, the war on fracking failed. When it came to fracking shale for natural gas, the United States interfered less than other countries and benefited enormously as a result. The United States allows property owners the mining and drilling rights to the earth beneath them. In other countries, those rights belong to the government, which is a major reason why fracking hasn't taken off in other countries. And he's openly endorsing human beings. Now, Schellenberg has also written a very good book, which is not exactly on the climate theme, but I'm enjoying it tremendously, San Francisco. And the subtitle of it is Why Progressives Ruin Cities. These are two really exceptionally good books, and he has deals with the key issues of how this whole decivilization, the madness for decivilization is what he calls it. For much of history, people with mental illness were thought to be possessed by gods or devils. Madness, as it was called, was believed to be supernatural, not natural. And so as he goes on, he's coming to see that this whole progressivism has essentially become a sickness. It's become a psychiatric problem in that we go about attacking the values and we release criminals, we're rewarding prostitutes, we're doing all the exact types of things that are wrong in terms of advancing ourselves as a civilization, using energy intelligently, but again, recognizing that fossil fuels are available, they're natural, they're not fossil fuels, they are hydrocarbon fuels. Another book, Fossil Future by Alec Epstein. Alan Epstein's an energy expert. He was the Center for Industrial Progress. I've seen him interviewed several times, and he is making the case, as I do, that there are ways in which hydrocarbon fuels can be burned safely and not pollute the air. They're not going to kill us. They're not going to produce so much carbon dioxide that we're all going to die. And they have remarkable ingredients. The remarkable natural attributes of oil, gas, and natural gas. This is a paragraph he writes. Remarkable natural attributes of fossil fuels. He still thinks they're fossil fuels, derived from the remarkable history of fossil fuels. And basically, he's arguing that they have natural storage. Energy that is available to us in a naturally stored form, like the energy in oil, is much better for cost effectiveness than energy that is naturally in the form of an intermittent flow, like light or sunlight or wind. One major reason is that naturally stored energy is highly conductive in to reliability. The ability to get energy when we need it and the amount we need it. For energy to be reliable, it has to be controllable, because the intermittent flows of sunlight and wind are not controllable. They cannot by themselves provide reliable energy without being accompanied by a massive storage system that stores energy when sunlight and wind are available and deploys it when they are not, which is most of the time. Okay, now these authors are, these are young guys. I mean, this Epstein's a young guy, and so is Sullenberger, and these guys are not persuaded by the ideological nature of climate change. Now, I've written a couple of articles recently, and I did one on American Thinker on Janet Curry. And Chris, we will show the article here about Janet Curry that I wrote. We had it up on The Truth Central. We talked about it a few days ago. It's right there. And what impressed me was how this was on AmericanThinker.com. I do a lot of writing for AmericanThinker.com. This is a leading climate scientist who doubts the veracity of the global warming movement. Now, this is an important article because what I'm pointing out here is that Judith Curry, who headed the Georgia Tech Environmental Center, very prestigious among climate scientists because she's quite good. And yet she is now decided that she's moved away from the radical ideology. Now, as you read what she's written in this book, and I'm going to pull up the article now so I get it exactly right, she is arguing until 2009. From 2007, she joined the IPCC consensus. She was a true believer in the Intergovernmental Policy and Climate Change of the United Nations that carbon dioxide was going to kill us all. We didn't stop using hydrocarbon fuels. Then she read the Climate Gate emails in 2009. Now, Climate Gate was a major scandal. Someone hacked a computer and had a lot of the emails these scientists were exchanging with one another from the IPCC with Michael Mann at that time, who did the hockey stick graph. The hockey stick graph is a complete farce. It says that Earth's temperatures were just copacetic, like the handle of a hockey stick. Everything was smooth. And then we came to the industrial age about 300 years ago. We started burning hydrocarbon fuels, and like the blade of the hockey stick, the Earth's temperatures shot up. And we are now at the hottest time ever. And that's why they hype these summers as being so hot, saying they're hottest ever, hottest day ever recorded. Well, this is nonsense. 80% of the Earth's history, 4.6 billion years, there was nothing inhabitable on the planet. It was pretty hot. It was molten. It was trying to simmer down to get so it could have life on the surface, which fortunately it did. Now, when she read these ClimateGate emails and she realized that the climate scientists were rigging the data, they knew it was false, and they were doing it anyway. She knew that they could not prove that carbon dioxide was causing Earth's temperatures to change. She knew, as a climate scientist, that the legitimate studies have for decades shown that carbon dioxide increases in the atmosphere following warming periods, because we're getting more green, we're getting more abundance. Human beings exhale carbon dioxide. We have a lot of plants that absorb it. And if you're really worried about it in the global warming period, plant more trees. It'll absorb more carbon dioxide. But when she saw the illegitimate nature of the science that was rigged and fake, as a university professor, she had a great deal of difficulty because you can't get grants, you can't get supported, you can't get promoted. So by 2017, she left the university altogether, created a private company that advises clients on their needs about predicting weather, predicting what they're going to do in terms of how climate might affect their businesses. Now, her major argument is mathematical. And the mathematical argument is critical. I devote a whole chapter or two to it when I'm talking about Edward Lorenz. And, I read an article called The Sun Heats Earth, which basically points out that the major cause of light and heat on Earth is the sun. It's not carbon dioxide. But the key point about understanding that Lorenz was able to demonstrate the mathematics in terms of chaos theory, that small differences, very small differences when you are starting a model. He was running a computer model in his office at MIT. He had a model he was going to try to design and show you how the climate worked. And he rounded off some numbers, then he went to a coffee break. When he came back, the model was producing wildly different results. And he realized that little changes in numbers, so, pi, which is not a rational number because it has endless numbers, infinite numbers of decimals, you can't divide it evenly, we'll never get a finite number for pi. And so therefore, we can't put it into a model. God doesn't work with decimal points. Climate just works. What Lorenz also realized was that it's a nonlinear system. In other words, when you get a set of differential equations, the variables interact so that one time it produces one result, another time it produces a very different result. You can't predict it. These are hard to solve. Some of them have never been solved. Differential equations that explain things like turbulence in water, turbulence in air. They're very useful equations, but they're nonlinear. Now, what this means is he actually did fractal math, which is pretty advanced, but he did a graph and showing that there are these, what he called strange attractors. It's not random, there are patterns that look like a butterfly. What he did in the butterfly effect, he said a butterfly flapping its wings in China could cause a tornado in Kansas because a little change could affect the whole system and produce an outcome dramatically different. If that butterfly had not flapped those wings, the tornado wouldn't have happened. But it's not linear. So sometimes when the butterfly flaps his wings, there's no tornado in Kansas. It goes a different direction. May have no impact much at all. Now, when Curry recognized these maths and the math that was fake for Michael Mann, the math that is junk science at the core of the IPCC, the global warming craze, what she realized was that the mathematical models, these models that these climate scientists are using, where the IPCC says we've got to, if we have 2 degrees warming or 1.5 degree warming over the pre-industrial temperature of the Earth, we're going to have cataclysmic climate change. We're going to have tornadoes, we're going to have hurricanes, we're going to have all kinds of disasters from climate. Al Gore with his polar bears. I mean, the whole 9 yards of predictions, of dire predictions. And she says this is a scam because those climate models reflect the bias of the person who created them. And since the mathematics are nonlinear, since the mathematics can't be the measurable, we can't get measurements out of these. Every single climate model ever created or ever will be created by human beings will fail to predict. And we could have known this just watching the weatherman every day. Can't tell you what's going to happen tomorrow. Can't tell you what's going to happen a week from tomorrow. Can't tell you what's going to happen a month from tomorrow because it's not predictable fully. Now, if it's summer, it's going to be warm for a while. If it's winter, it's going to be colder for a while. I mean, these things we know because in those kinds of changes, which are seasonal, which are repetitive, there are certain patterns that are repeated. But the major patterns are sometimes the sun burns hot, sometimes the sun burns cool. The sun in cycle 25 right now is burning hotter than in cycle 24. It interacts with the cosmic rays. Cosmic rays help form clouds. Cosmic rays from nebulae and outer space have an impact on forming clouds on Earth because they release ions into the atmosphere, which are important in creating the aerosols, which are needed to have cloud formation. When the sun's burning hot, magnetic force of the Earth is magnified, intensified, fewer cosmic rays get through, we have fewer clouds. That's another reason why it's warm when the sun's burning hot. Sun's burning cold, we have a little ice age. When the sun goes through the Milankovitch cycles in an egg shape and it's very far out, The sun, at that point of the most extreme from the Earth, about every 100,000 years, we have an ice age, and we'll have another one, regardless how much carbon dioxide there is in the atmosphere. And these are fundamental principles that, again, people aren't reading, they aren't being trained in the schools, and they aren't getting. Now, I want to go to a couple more points on this. The second one that I want to cover, and so basically, Judith Curry is right. And the mathematics are what beat this movement and show it to be ideological. Now, recently, John Clauser, who is a Nobel physics laureate, came out and he was talking about how the climate science is corrupt. And he slammed the climate community. Now, he was supposed to speak at the IMF's International Monetary Fund meeting here coming up, and it was the IMF Independent Evaluation Office. He was going to talk at the end of July, and they canceled his talk when he came out and said the climate science was junk. So Dr. Clauser was due to speak to the IMF, International Monetary Fund's Independent Evaluation Office, under the title, Let's Talk, How Much Can We Trust the IPCC Climate Predictions? Because he, too, understands the math. He, too, understands the physics. And he said that the article would appear that, not much, we can't trust the IPCC very much, and we can't trust the International Monetary Fund very much, because Clauser gave a politically incorrect answer and they canceled his speech. Okay, so what Clauser observed was that the misguided climate science has metastasized, cancer term, into massive shock journalistic pseudoscience. The pseudoscience, he continued, has become a scapegoat for a wide variety of other ills, been promoted and extended by singularly minded business marketing agents, politicians, journalists, government agencies, and environmentalists. In my opinion, there is no real climate crisis. That's the truth. Now, we don't know, for instance, whether the climate would get hit by a major asteroid. We could have 1,000 years of volcanic activity. It's happened before. But the point is, it's been taken over by the Marxists. This book is one of the things I think is most important. It's a very difficult book to read, because if you've never read any Marxism, I really don't recommend it for bedtime reading. It's very difficult and dense and boring. But this is written by a Japanese, Kohei Saito, and the subtitle is, he wants degrowth communism, degrowth, depopulation, reduce with too many of us. Now, Anthropocene it comes from anthropos in Greek. It means human beings. And so we are the cause of our own destruction. This is the age, this is the next extinction, the extinction of the Anthropocene. So I say that communism is self-hating. It's suicidal, produces only negativity, can destroy. So what do they want you to do? They want you to have 15-minute cities. You can't go more than 15 miles from where you live. As far as you can walk, that's it. Then your electronics shut off. Don't have to have an electric car. Of course, they don't talk about the EVs, where they get the lithium. They don't talk about where they get the energy for the electricity. They don't talk about how you recycle the batteries or how you handle the batteries when they catch fire. The solutions of these people don't work. They were never intended to work. The science is junk and they know it's junk. The solutions don't work. The solutions are designed to say the standard of living is too high. We've got to destroy the middle class. It's completely destructive. We want a small oligarchical group of communists to be in charge, and they'll tell everybody else what to do. Mostly what they want you to do is die. Now, people are beginning to realize this. This is another good book that is out, and this one is very, very recent, The Grip of Culture. It's written by Andy West, and I love the picture on the front of it. There's a climate nut for you. Maybe he's going to glue himself to a Van Gogh painting, or I saw they glued themselves in Germany to a sidewalk. They used an epoxy formula, but they couldn't get them free of the sidewalk. They had to jackhammer the sidewalk up, or the road up. They were trying to block traffic, and they'll probably have to amputate the guy's hand in order to get the cement off his hand. What this book is about is that the climate change has become a secular religion. It doesn't make sense. It isn't founded in fact, and its solutions are insane. That's the definition to me of postmodern Marxism. It believes it's basically schizophrenic. They want the schizophrenics to run society. And of course, the schizophrenics want to kill the jailers or whomever. They're just nuts. And as a secular religion, it replaces God. It says we can be in control. Now, I mean, I don't know about you. Do you want to let this guy tell you what to do? He'll have you eating bugs. I doubt if he's going to eat bugs. He's going to be like Bill Gates. He's going to fly around in his private jet. All right, I want to end up with with this book, which is increasingly one I'm going to for a lot of commentary, the psychology of totalitarianism. I may have to write on this subject myself. I've liked these books, been reading them since graduate school, which is decades ago. It's by Matthias Desmet, Desmet. And you've got to read. You've got to get off the internet, turn off the television, get a book, read it. Now, what he's talking about here is the crazy nature, the totalitarian nature of the secular ideologies. He said that basically these are movements that are designed to imprison us. And he calls there a striking phenomenon. He said that since the beginning of the 21st century, a new morality has arisen from the belly of Enlightenment thinking, which in a number of respects is stricter, more irrational, more hypocritical than the prior religious morality in which the Enlightenment sought to obliterate to set people free. With the rise of the woke culture, society fell prey to implicit and explicit rules that made every detail of human interaction more precarious. In the wake of the #MeToo movement, students were taught how to flirt legally and compliantly. Freshman initiations were subjected to increasingly strict regulations. Sweden introduced a new law stating that sex is only legal if the parties involved give their consent via an advanced signed contract. Nude figures of the paintings by Flemish masters were no longer allowed to be posted on social media, and Netflix introduced a rule stipulating that eye contact between employees should not last longer than 5 seconds. Employees are not allowed to ask for each other's phone numbers without asking permission. The new norm has become so stringent that even suggesting there is a physical difference between a man and a woman can be considered a violation of sexual integrity. It's insane. So the climate movement is giving rise to a new variety of crimes, environmental crimes, to the point that using a wood-burning stove, eating meat, or living off-grid in the countryside are considered environmental violations. Environmental ideology is taken on to such an extreme that's become opposed to that which it originally was ushered in to achieve, which is getting back to nature. Off the grid, you're a criminal because you are not complying with the rules about carbon. Your carbon footprint is not under the control of the totalitarians. He said, environmental violations are also rather selective and inconsistent in their strictness. For example, reducing one's carbon footprint is taken to extremes, while there's remarkable leniency regarding energy consumption through internet use, which is as high as the energy consumption from all air traffic combined, Of course, we're also going to have to limit airplanes because they have too much carbon dioxide. And the mining of Bitcoin, which is okay, which is as high as the energy consumption of an average European country. We've got to have Bitcoin. They like it. And also the environmental damage caused by mining ores for batteries for electric cars is rarely discussed. The environmental movement was once a dissident voice, but which in turn, with eco-modernism, it has merged into the dominant mechanistic ideology. Modernism is a phenomenon that took off in France post-war, World War II, and it basically is the argument that all reality is subjective. All we do is have language constructs. It comes out of Wittgenstein, who was a philosopher from Vienna who ended up in Oxford during World War II. He was a language philosopher. I studied him extensively when I was in graduate school. Now, one more point that he gets to, he said this leads to a regulation mania. He's saying that when he first got to Ghent University, he's in Belgium, there were very few lines. He could look out on the street from his office. There were very few lines. But he said, today, this intersection has gone from a large asphalt plain with few sparse white lines to a mosaic of lines and colored lines indicating where cyclists, pedestrians, and cars are and are not allowed to go, with ever more traffic signs and traffic lights mounted thereon. And it isn't only the intersection. In train stations, you have to buy a ticket to have access to the toilets. Yellow squares indicate where smokers can indulge in their dangerous addiction. And you're allowed to park only in certain delineated, paid parking spaces for a certain period of time. So what he's pointing out here, what Matthias Desmond is pointing out, is that these rules and regulations, so now you've got all these lines telling you where you can go, where you can't go, and during the coronavirus, he said it intensified during the coronavirus. This phenomenon, these rules, this control, which is what this is all about. It's a phenomenon to control you, this postmodernism, which is the idea that all reality is subjective. It's a French idea that developed in the French cafes, Jean Sartre, etc., after World War II, when existentialism morphed into postmodernism. And it's fundamentally, it justifies schizophrenia. Whatever is your personal reality has to be everybody's reality. And so if we have this ideological agreement, the carbon dioxide is evil, it's going to kill us all, and we're scaring our children with this in school. And by the way, we have to eliminate hydrocarbon fuels. It's going to reduce populations, which is what they want, and capitalism, which is what they want. During the coronavirus, this phenomenon, this exceptional rule-making phenomenon, which is part of how it morphs into totalitarianism, reached a temporary peak with an endless number of arrows indicating on which floors and stairs you could go, where to walk, and in which direction. Signs reminding you that you're required to wear a face mask. Confined spaces demarcated by crash barriers, preventing one bubble from coming in contact with another bubble at festivals and cultural events. And this goes on and on and on. Rule-making. And in this rulemaking, the control seeps in. So the problems here, and he gets down to the fundamental analysis of this, was saying that at a certain point during the second lockdown in 2020, the website for the Belgian Ministry of Health, lives in Belgium, stated that non-cohabitating partners were allowed to visit one another, yet the police could still fine people for doing so. You couldn't visit anybody. Couldn't go see your parents or your loved ones in a hospital, even if they were dying. He said basically that the solutions here that are to these problems the problems exposed by the new morality are legitimate. Sexism and racism are symbols of cultural decline. People have to take care of nature or the climate, or we will irreparably destroy it. Solidarity with the victims of coronavirus and the victims of public health is evidence of our humanity. That's all the virtue signaling. And he said basically, though, there are ways. No, we don't want sexism. We don't want racism. We want to protect the environment. These are legitimate, but not when they get morphed into postmodernism. So he writes, in the Me Too discourse, the lines between clumsy, flirtation, and rape are blurred. The Black Lives discourse, to make any reference to skin color is like walking on eggshells. The climate movement alienates man from nature. With the coronavirus crisis, healthcare has become an attack on life and liberty. Moreover, as Freud pointed out, the repressive nature of the new morality is fueling an exacerbated return of the repressed. Between 2015 and 2020, the use of sexist language doubled. The use of racist and menacing terms tripled on social media. And this counterproductivity must be acknowledged, albeit with the reservations that we have always had with regards to numbers and statistics. Now, the point is the following, that the solution to this, all totalitarianism, is not to give into it, not to virtue signal, not to suddenly be co-opted by the movement, but to resist it. And the way it's resisted is with truth. Now, the Bible says, judge something by the fruits of the tree. So what are the fruits of this climate change movement? You know, you can't have electric stoves. You can't have heaters. We're going to take all your appliances and re-engineer them so they don't work as well. You can't eat meat because cows fart, and that's methane, and it's greenhouse gas. We have to end farms. We can't use nitrous oxide, so we can't have fertilizers. We can't grow crops. You can't go more than 15 miles from where you live. You can use your electronics, but they can be controlled. Control, control, control. Where it ends up is with, oligarchy. That's where that Marx and the Anthropocene, going to be a fight again between where the communists. World War II was preceded by a battle in Germany between the communists and the fascists. Fascists were left. They're like the World Economic Forum. They want to control the multinational corporations involved with government and multinational corporations and oligarchs ruling the world. That was fascism. Communism wanted no private property, so the oligarchs could own everything you owned. Well, these two have morphed together. And the oligarchs who are now in universities, who are in corporations, they're all realizing that these destructive thinking are like malware for the brain. And when people get infected by the global warming movement, the ideology, which was constructed as a lie, they march themselves into slavery. And it'll destroy the middle class in the process. That's the first thing they aim to do, is destroy the people being well off and create this division between people. They've always picked racism as one of the themes because communists knew in the 1930s that race was an explosive issue. They make one group hate another group. They focus on hatred. They focus on intensifying hatred. All of this is satanic, and it comes out of the Bible. This is what happens to a race of people, a group of people, a culture, a society, when it abandons God and decides it can make its own values. And it makes climate into a secular religion. It makes wokeism, gender, into a secular religion. And then you can choose whatever you could have, how many. There's an infinite number of genders because you can be an animal, you can be past life, you can be extraterrestrial, you can be coming out of science fiction. Make it up. That's who your gender is. Male, female combination, third generation, fourth gender, fifth generation, sixth generation, another gender. It's infinite. It's also insane. That's why they put people in psychiatric wards, because they've lost the ability to know that there's objective right and wrong, that there are laws by which things work. They think they can jump off buildings and they fly, and I invite them to do so because they won't fly. And we have to say to these people, nonsense. Your science is wrong. The facts are wrong. So that's why I'm dedicated to being on the truth central. We've got to come back to God. Got to come back to, we don't rule this place. God rules this place. And there are laws by which this place works, even down to the subatomic level. Even relativity theory has laws by which it works. We may not yet understand them all, but they're there. This is not a random place. Now, yes, there's random events. There's things that are nonlinear. That's built into the mathematics. But the rules that regulate Earth and regulate morality are absolute values. They've been the same as long as human beings have been around. They're simple. Don't kill other people. Don't lie. Don't steal. Don't cheat. They're pretty simple rules. But again, as Benjamin Franklin said, if you want to have a limited government, if you want to have people with God-given rights, if you want freedom, if you want productivity, it's only for people that believe in God. It won't work in any other context. And I've come to see that to be true. There's been a special broadcast. We'll have more of these. This is Dr. Jerome Corsi. This is the truthcentral.com. It's Wednesday, August 2nd, 2023. In the end, God always wins. God will win here too. And I encourage you to join me in spirit of 2 Chronicles 7:14. Let's get on our knees and ask God's forgiveness that we allowed this insanity to come into the world. That we didn't start fighting in the 1940s when the left was taking God out of the schools. And we didn't fight Roe v. Wade harder when the left wanted to kill babies in the womb. These are violations of God's laws. God's going to be greatly grieved. God's judgment will come. If we, in the spirit of 2 Chronicles 7:14, get on our knees, God may heal the land. Let's pray that happens. One way or the other, God will win. These nutcases will create nuclear war. Dr. Jerome Corsi, thank you for joining us. We are doing podcasts every weekday, thetruthcentral.com. God bless.